Have you ever been fact-checked by Facebook and PolitiFact? I have. The fact check was an obviously politically motivated and successful attempt to suppress a perfectly valid point I made. And now the media just can't understand why we won't trust a government-run disinformation board. Disinformation is a problem. It's a problem that people can flood the world with false claims and conspiracy theories. It's a problem that foreign nations can program bots to spread viral nonsense in order to destabilize your country. This is a legitimate problem. But what do you do about the problem? Well, what you don't do about the problem is give your government new powers to suppress speech, because shocker, your government won't just use that power to suppress actual disinformation spread by foreign enemies. It will use that power to suppress your valid criticisms of the ruling party. I would like to live in a world where people trusted their governments and the media because politicians and journalists were trustworthy. Unfortunately, we don't live in that world. We live in a world where just about anyone with the slightest bit of influence will use that influence to manipulate people. But there is a positive side to not trusting the government or the media. The positive side is that when the government establishes a new disinformation governance board and journalists cheer for the new board, critics will heckle these Orwellian goose-steppers into retreating, naked and defeated, back to the safe spaces they crawled out of. Yes, after only 3 weeks of being mercilessly ridiculed as the Ministry of Truth, the Disinformation Governance Board has died a humiliating death. We'll read a bit about the timely death of the Ministry of Truth from the Lords of Disinformation, CNN, and then I'll share what happened to me when I was fact-checked by Facebook and PolitiFact, so we can see why these kinds of government boards will always be a horrible idea. But first, if you're concerned about internet security in an age of online manipulation, and you're either stupid or insane if you aren't, one of the most basic, fundamental, simplest things you can do to protect yourself is to get a subscription to Atlas VPN. Like it or not, there are people and companies who are constantly trying to steal your data, your personal information, your passwords. There are companies that are tracking what you do online so they can sell that information to the highest bidder. When you go online, you need a VPN, a virtual private network. So click on the link in the description box and get a subscription to Atlas VPN. Atlas VPN is the best VPN deal on the market, developed by top cybersecurity experts and IT engineers that sends all of your internet traffic through an encryption tunnel. It hides your IP address even if you're using public Wi-Fi. It blocks malicious links, ads, and trackers. It monitors data breaches and warns you if your personal information or passwords have been compromised. Some of you may be disturbed by the analogy I keep using, but sometimes analogies are supposed to be disturbing. I really mean it when I say using the internet without a VPN is like going to a $10 prostitute without a condom. If you don't like the analogy, don't blame me. Blame the internet for being so incredibly disgusting and dangerous, and, not to mention, immoral. If you sign up now, you can be fully protected for just $1.99 per month. That covers all of your devices with one subscription. So click the link in the description box, download the app, get a subscription, and turn it on. Going from horribly exposed to extremely safe will only take you a couple of minutes. So get Atlas VPN and practice safe surfing. Now, let's read about what just happened to the short-lived Disinformation Governance Board. CNN, the self-proclaimed most trusted name in news, reports, the disinformation expert hired to run the Department of Homeland Security's newly created Disinformation Board has resigned after the department paused the board. Nina Jankowicz, a disinformation expert with experience working on Ukraine and Russia issues, was tapped to helm the Disinformation Governance Board earlier this month. The interagency team was meant to coordinate department activities related to disinformation aimed at the U.S. population and infrastructure. But Jankowicz's appointment quickly drew condemnation from GOP lawmakers and right-wing media who pointed to her past tweets and statements regarding Hunter Biden's laptop and Christopher Steele, the author of the so-called Steele dossier. After DHS decided to pause the board, Jankowicz made the decision to resign, she said in a statement released through a spokesperson. See that? These GOP lawmakers and right-wing journalists don't trust an obviously biased person to decide what is and what is not disinformation. Shame on them. I mean, progressives would definitely trust a bunch of conservatives to decide what is and what is not disinformation, wouldn't they? After 6 years dedicated to the study of disinformation and best practices in responding to it, I joined the Department of Homeland Security to be the executive director of the Disinformation Governance Board with the intention of supporting the department's important work addressing disinformation that affects the homeland, she said. With the board's work paused and its future uncertain, I have decided to leave DHS to return to my work in the public sphere. It is deeply disappointing that mischaracterizations of the board became a distraction from the department's vital work, and indeed, along with recent events globally and nationally, embodies why it is necessary. I maintain my commitment to building awareness of disinformation's threats and trust the department will do the same, Jankowicz said. DHS and the White House had previously defended the new initiative and backed Jankowicz to lead it. Bye, Felicia. The Washington Post first reported on the suspension of the Disinformation Board and Jankowicz's resignation. In a statement, a DHS spokesperson said Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas has asked former DHS Secretary Michael Chertoff and former U.S. Deputy Attorney General Jamie Gorelick to lead a review of the board through the Homeland Security Advisory Council. During that review, the board's work will be paused and it will not convene. The board has been grossly and intentionally mischaracterized. It was never about censorship or policing speech in any manner. It was designed to ensure we fulfill our mission to protect the homeland while protecting core constitutional rights, the spokesperson said. However, false attacks have become a significant distraction from the department's vitally important work to combat disinformation that threatens the safety and security of the American people. In the words of John Bender, BOOHOO. So, they wouldn't be policing speech in any manner. Instead, they would be combating disinformation. And how would you combat disinformation exactly? By policing speech. It's like real police saying, oh, we're not going to police your neighborhood. Instead, we're going to arrest all the criminals and throw them in jail. Yeah, and that would require policing the neighborhood, wouldn't it? But what if the Ministry of Truth only wanted to police, let's say, Russian disinformation? That would be okay, wouldn't it? Well, if we actually trusted the people who were doing it, maybe. But we don't, because we know what they would actually do. An organization whose only job was to police Russian disinformation would do what? They would label anything that went against their party's interests Russian disinformation. And we've seen these people suppress completely true and accurate stories by calling the stories Russian disinformation. I know they think we're stupid, but they must think we're really, really stupid. How does this work in practice? Well, I don't have to guess because I've been fact-checked. Back in 2020, future President Joe Biden was reading his teleprompter to Muslims to convince them to vote for him, and he quoted a hadith.
Hadith from the Prophet Muhammad instructs, whomever among you sees a wrong, let him change it with his hand. If he is not able, then with his tongue. If he is not able, then with his heart.
Now, that sounds like a lovely little teaching. Unless you've actually read it and you know what it means. If you've actually read it and you know what it means, you know that in context, Muhammad was talking about different forms of jihad. If you're strong enough to wage physical jihad, you wage physical jihad. You use your hand. If you're not strong enough to wage physical jihad, you wage jihad with your speech. And if it's too dangerous to wage jihad with your speech, you at least long for jihad in your heart. I thought this was worth pointing out, so I posted a video titled, "Joe Biden Accidentally Calls for Jihad Against America." I put the relevant passages on the screen to prove my point. Pretty standard D. Wood video. But a bunch of people started sharing the video on Facebook, and in articles, it ended up getting hundreds of thousands of views and looked like it was starting to go viral. Then something changed. People started sending me messages saying that the video was labeled as disinformation. It had been fact-checked by PolitiFact and exposed as false. I went to PolitiFact, and part of the response was criticizing other people who were using the points I had made, but the fact check was applied to my video as well, and they did respond to my main point. So we see on PolitiFact, no, U.S. government didn't promote video of Joe Biden calling for a Muslim jihad. Biden did not call on Muslims to wage jihad. He praised many Muslim Americans for promoting peace. Now, I said he accidentally called for jihad, and this is just indisputable. You can watch my original video. The link is in the description box. In the video, I showed the hadiths where Muhammad is specifically referring to 3 different types of jihad. Jihad of the hand, jihad of the tongue, and jihad of the heart. Whoever controls Biden's teleprompter and wanted to win some Muslim votes went to a lame website and cut and pasted something they found without knowing what it was actually about. So I made a video showing what it was about. What was the point? Stop quoting things when you have no clue what they mean. We've been dealing with this nonsense for decades. We don't need another politician misrepresenting what Islam teaches. Pretty straightforward. But again, a lot of people started sharing the video in an election year, so there was a need to suppress it. PolitiFact discusses some of the claims that were made by other sites and then gives the refutation of my argument. Yasser Qadhi, a prominent cleric and dean of the Islamic Seminary of America, said the hadith encourages Muslims to act if they see something that goes against their moral values. If they can't, they should say something about it, or in the very least, disagree with it in their hearts, Qadhi said. Even the radical jihadists don't use this particular hadith to justify their misinterpretations, Qadhi wrote to PolitiFact by email. Jihad in Arabic literally means struggle. Notice, Yasser Qadhi says that radical jihadists don't use this particular hadith. That may be true, jihadis have much better passages to quote than this, but I wasn't making a video about the favorite go-to passages of jihadis. I was making a video about what the hadith actually means. And again, Muhammad said he was talking about jihad. So my point was indisputable, and yet my video was declared to be disinformation, and after it was declared to be disinformation, views plummeted. You may have noticed a more fundamental problem with this fact check. Who did PolitiFact get to fact check my claim? Sheikh Yasser Qadhi. Sheikh Yasser Qadhi is someone I regard as a compulsive liar. Even his Muslim critics have exposed him for saying one thing behind closed doors and then saying something completely different in public. But let's ignore what I think about him. What does he think about me? Is he an unbiased judge of my speech? Tell us what you think about me, Sheikh.
I have rarely come across somebody who is more vulgar, vile, foul-mouthed, noxious, repugnant, depraved excuse of a preacher. Whatever he is, David Wood, it is obvious to any person of faith, is not a man of God. He's a vulgar, obscene, evil jerk. I mean, honestly, there's nothing else to be said.
That's the guy PolitiFact chose to fact check my video. And that's the problem. If someone says something you don't like, if someone says something that's politically inconvenient to your party, can you find someone who will call the person's speech disinformation? Of course you can. You can even call it Russian disinformation if you wanted. We think that David was told to say that by Vladimir Putin. Can you think of anything that your opponent could say that you couldn't dismiss by calling it Russian disinformation? I can't. So here's what everyone should realize. Disinformation is a problem. But politicians and journalists and social media platforms having the power to ban speech with a wave of a disinformation wand is an even bigger problem. The way you would deal with disinformation is by exposing and refuting it, and hopefully by encouraging people not to gullibly believe everything they see on the internet. But it's also important to understand that there just isn't a perfect solution here. We don't live in some ideal world where only true statements are uttered and only true statements are believed. We live in a messed up world full of messed up people. So beware of politicians pointing to a problem and proposing their solution when their solution would be worse than the problem.